A single word from a closed-door meeting recently took over the Indian news cycle. Reports surfaced that India's top diplomat had dismissed Pakistan as a broker nation, a middleman that facilitates and profits from the regional crises of others. The statement came from External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. As a career diplomat who spent decades in the Foreign Service, Jaishankar is usually associated with the precise, measured language of international relations. At home, the rhetoric was an immediate success. The broker label went viral, drawing heavy applause from a domestic audience that values a hardline stance against Islamabad. But classical diplomacy often operates on a different frequency. A former U.S. ambassador once described the tradecraft this way: "You are trained to say something when there is nothing to say, and to say nothing when there is something to say." Notably, this condemnation wasn't delivered as an official, on-the-record protest to the United States or at a global summit. It was shared with opposition members during an all-party meeting, a room full of domestic political rivals rather than international counterparts. This aggressive posturing at home coincides with a period where India has been notably absent from the high-stakes peace negotiations currently attempting to de-escalate the Middle East. When a nation finds itself sidelined from the primary table of global decision-making, loud domestic rhetoric can serve to bridge the gap, projecting a sense of control to its own citizens while the actual deals are struck elsewhere. To see where the current diplomatic leverage actually resides, we must look at the escalating conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Iran's recent retaliation demonstrated the limits of even the most advanced defense systems. By launching a concentrated barrage of 100 missiles at once, they simply overwhelmed the capacity of interceptors to track and neutralize every incoming target. The physical results were significant. 13 U.S. military bases across the region sustained damage, with facilities in Kuwait taking the brunt of the impact. The scale of the strikes forced personnel to relocate and manage operations from remote, improvised offices. The material cost to the U.S. military has been high. In just 3 weeks, American forces depleted 1/3 of their anti-missile defense supply, hardware that takes nearly 8 years to manufacture and replace. This depletion of defensive assets has left the U.S. in a vulnerable position. With air defenses thinning, Washington has an urgent incentive to secure a ceasefire before they are forced into a much larger, more costly ground engagement. This shift demonstrates a new tactical reality. Sustained, high-volume missile strikes can neutralize the traditional advantages of a superpower, turning the conflict into a war of attrition that the U.S. cannot easily sustain. Faced with these military constraints, and unable to speak directly to Tehran, the U.S. took an unexpected path. They bypassed their usual strategic allies and turned to Pakistan to serve as the lead mediator. The diplomatic backchannel was specific and direct. This map traces the route. Washington sent a 15-point peace proposal to Islamabad, intended for Iranian leadership. It hit an immediate wall. Tehran rejected it, returning a 5-point counterproposal through Islamabad, demanding an end to assassinations and full financial compensation for infrastructure damage. These demands put Washington in a corner. The idea of the U.S. government officially compensating Iran for war damages is a massive political liability that the current administration can likely never accept. This mediation role explains why India's leadership is so frustrated. By using Islamabad as the primary gatekeeper, the U.S. gave Pakistan the international legitimacy that India has spent years trying to dismantle. The broker insult allowed New Delhi to signal toughness to a domestic audience while avoiding a direct public rift with Washington. It was a way to vent frustration at a neighbor because criticizing the superpower for choosing that neighbor was too risky. Beyond the diplomatic maneuvering, the failure to end this regional conflict is causing severe disruptions to the energy hubs that power global trade. South Asia is already feeling the pressure. In Bangladesh, the cost of aviation fuel recently jumped by 80%, threatening the country's transportation sector and general commerce. Alarm bells are ringing across the Asia-Pacific. In the Philippines, leadership has warned that the nation's energy security is now on a hair trigger, with supplies becoming increasingly unpredictable. Even in Australia, the crisis has reached the consumer level, with hundreds of petrol stations running completely out of fuel as the supply chain falters. In India, the contrast is stark. While the domestic media focuses on viral, tough-talking soundbites, The reality on the ground is one of rising gas shortages and quiet factory closures in industrial hubs. This economic reality is being carefully managed in the press. The goal is to keep these warning signs quiet to preserve the public image of a government in total command of the situation. Real diplomacy is meant to be a shield, protecting a nation's economy from the chaos of the outside world. But when that strategy is replaced by a focus on viral soundbites, the shield begins to crumble. When megaphone diplomacy takes the place of actual geopolitical influence, the illusion eventually fades, and it is the average citizen who feels the consequences at the petrol pump.